Lee Pascoe, welcome to the DCQ podcast Special Sits. Fabulous to have you on. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. It's been so long.
It has been so long. So you're joining us from Melbourne, Australia today, right? I mean, couldn't be further away from London. I'm looking out of the window and it's still dark. You're heading into the summer. So, I guess you got the better end here.
Yeah, still light.
Yeah, well, still light, which is great. I mean, I'm hoping it's getting light here quickly. You are the first, crypto in distress expert on the podcast. And I'm hoping that in our conversation today, we can maybe demystify some things about this, most recent asset class that we have, digital assets in insolvency, without getting too technical about it. But maybe we can start, at the beginning first. And, as I understand it, you grew up in Australia. Was that in Melbourne or somewhere else?
No, I grew up in Melbourne, born and bred. Both of my parents came over here from Europe. So I'm one of the generation of Australians that are first generation Australians. But yep, born and bred, have lived in Melbourne, have lived in Sydney, have lived in Perth. So,
oh wow! But the start was in Melbourne, and do you have brothers and sisters as well?
Have a younger sister who is opposite to me in every shape or form, in every way. She's a short version of me, so we look alike, but everything else is polar opposite.
I mean, maybe what I would like to know is so how, when, and why did you decide to pursue a career in law that resulted in you ending up in the special sits space? Was that something that you decided on your own? Was it sort of heavily influenced by your parents or by friends? How did this all come about?
Television, blame television in the 70s and 80s. So there was a television show in Australia called Carson's Law, which was about a female magistrate. And she had the hair and she had the black cloak. And one day I was about 7 or 8 years old and I said to my parents, that's what I'm going to do. What is that? That's what I'm going to do. And Dad explained to me, my parents are very young. So when they had me, they were sort of 19 and 20. So they had this precocious child that at 7 years old is announcing that she's about to become a barrister or a magistrate. And I went to school and told everyone at school I was doing that. And they told me that little girls didn't do that. Little girls were nurses or teachers. So Dad went to school and Dad sorted that out. And so I was always pretty much destined for law in that regard. I loved reading. I was good at reading. I was great at comprehension and analysis and all of that stuff. What I didn't realize, and that's probably why Dad encouraged it, my parents both aren't university educated, but my entire family in Europe are either in law or politics. So they never sort of did anything like that. But it was just like this. It was this thing. So as I became an adult, I realized, oh yeah, okay, this is not actually going that far from the fold as I thought it was. My dad's a musician, so I had no benchmark in Australia, so to speak. And then I finished I finished high school, and all I did was athletics. I was on the state athletics team. I had no interest of doing university to do law. I wanted to be a physical education teacher so I could keep running. I started medicine.
Oh, wow. And where in Europe are your parents from?
So Mum's from the border in Germany and Dad is from northern Italy.
Oh, right. Okay.
So,
great.
Yeah, I'm a pure northerner.
Well, depends on where you are, if you look from the Netherlands, towards North Italy, that's
True.
pretty much
You make
south.
a good point. So I finished high school. I started medicine. I hated medicine because I actually walked around asking people, because I got really good marks in high school. And we do a mark system here where you just sort of get a high mark and you go into a course that's for a high mark. So I walked around saying to people, what did you get in English? And I was getting, 49 out of 100, 51 out of 100, and I got 99 out of 100. And I'm like, I'm in the wrong place. So university went back
It's
after
very
6
much not a
months.
culture. It was not a culture where, having high marks was good. It was actually, something that you should hide and not be proud of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I left university without telling my parents, and I got a job.
Oh, wow. And what
And
we're talking about the 90s here, where
yep.
yeah.
90s, early 90s. So I got a job selling, well, I already had a part-time job selling recorded music, so the equivalent of HMV.
Okay. Yeah.
So I had a job doing that. I did that for a couple of years, and I knew I wasn't ever going to do that permanently. And then when I hit 20, I was classed as a mature age student in Australia. So
Wow.
I went into university and I did my law degree in 3 years and a bit.
And that
Came
was in
out.
a university, what was it, just outside of Melbourne, I saw, right?
So I started in Perth and then I transferred back to Melbourne.
Okay. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So
So,
it was a bumpy ride.
why medical school when early on you had identified that the rope would fit you and you'd go there?
So my dad had decided that there was no way that I was doing physical education when I had got 100 marks over the mark to get into physical education. So he basically went around knocking on every university's door saying, what do I do with this child? She's got these marks. She can't get into law because we have to do a preference. In Australia, you do this preference thing, and I had never put law down as a preference. So
Oh,
when you go
wow.
into university, I think in Europe you sign on, but we don't do that. In year 12, in our last year of high school, we actually have to write down in a row what we think we might want to do before we do our exams. And I hadn't put law down because that was, as far as I was concerned, I was going to become the next 100-meter hurdler for Australia. I wasn't really interested in that stuff.
That was your your favorite thing. So
Yeah, that
sprint
was
hurdles.
I
Wow.
was sprint hurdler, yeah. And so Dad went around after I got my marks to all of these different faculties saying, she's got these marks. What do we do with her? She does this, she does that. And it was, I think it was called Lincoln at that time, but it was part of medicine. So first year medicine and first year physiotherapy did the same course. And they sort of said, well, she might become a good sports physiotherapist.
So medicine was very much still linked to your your love for track and field and sort
Yeah.
of the sports world.
Yep.
Yeah.
It didn't last 6 months.
Well, and then into music and actually, having a job. So did you move out and sort of lived on your own?
Yeah.
Because that's something that, these days, I left home at 17 and I
So did
couldn't,
I.
wait to do it. Now, completely different story.
No, I moved out at 17 as well. My mum jokes that my dad didn't realise I'd moved out of home until about 6 months later because he still saw me all the time. I was sort of like,
Walking in and out.
but no, I moved out of home. I already had a part-time job, and because it was school holidays at the end of school, I transferred that into a full-time job, and I was doing athletics training. I was everywhere all at once at 17 anyway. So it
So
wasn't.
were you actually sort of, was the job very much something that facilitated you having a real go at maybe getting at the highest level of of your sport? Because I've actually seen a number of people do that. The next generation. So my kids sort of did rugby at a high level. They were gung ho. Both would be professional rugby players. Both aren't professional rugby players, obviously, but there were people that yeah. that actually went into academies and got a contract. And there's also, I think, because my oldest one did, track and field as well, sort of 400 meters. There was a 400 meter hurdler who was exactly, he didn't want to study. He sort of, had a job, and he wanted to see how far he could get. But yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's probably right. I was pretty realistic that I knew what my limitations were, but I also knew I was never going to make any money at it. That was the biggest thing. And I sort of I've always been brought up to be self-sufficient. So I sort of in the back of my mind went, this is great. You're never going to win a gold medal at Olympics. Sure, you might make a final or something like that. And you're also going to be 10 years behind in the workforce. So I made it. I got injured as well. And when I got really badly injured at 2021, I made a decision that was sort of it, and I would go back to university.
So what was the fastest time that you clocked? Can you remember?
Oh, God. 100 meters, I would have been about 13. 100 meter hurdles would have been about 13.6, 13.7.
That is
that was quick.
that is quick indeed. Wow. But so you did that, and then you still wanted to go to law school. But so how did you overcome, I guess, the hurdle that you didn't tick the box, in high school?
So we have a system here that when you turn 21, I think it's in your 21st year, you can go back as a mature age student. And because I'd already got the marks, so usually that's for students that don't get the marks, but have some life experience. But because I'd already got the marks, they just sort of went, come forth.
Okay, good.
So, yeah, I got into Perth because I was living in Perth at the time. I had friends living in Perth. So I did a year at Murdoch University in Perth, and then I transferred back to Melbourne.
Okay. And so how was law school for you? And was, within law school, was, insolvency, financial distress, special situations on the radar screen, or, none of that was actually sort of the special sits term was probably not even invented by that time. Same thing with me. Did you do anything in financial distress?
I was going to be a sports lawyer or an intellectual property lawyer for music. That was where I was going. I ended up doing articles all my graduate year in a law firm that specialised in sports law. And for whatever reason, I don't know, we ended up getting an airline client. So the partner that I worked for got Air New Zealand, not entirely, but for a piece of litigation. Air New Zealand had a subsidiary in Australia called ANSET. ANSET went into insolvency, and it had a series of travel agents, quite a large group of travel agents, and we acted on the ANSET collapse. So it was about probably 2 years after I started. And
so
then
that was like early 2000s we're talking
2000s,
about. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then from there, so I started off as a litigator primarily, and then from there, I just took to it, I guess. I think I took to the fact that you do both. You do litigation and you do the front end documentation and things like that, restructuring.
So when you graduated, you decided to go in private practice. That's what you wanted to do. So you and your first firm, what kind of firm was it? Was it like a regional firm? Was it a national firm? International cross-border firm?
Boutique. So
firm.
it was a very small boutique firm that started in the suburbs, close to the centre, but still in the suburbs. And we moved into the city because of the nature of the clients that we got. So it was a very good boutique, to the extent that we got some very large corporate clients. We only did corporate stuff, and it was split into litigation and commercial. And I was on the litigation side to begin with, and I lasted there for 7 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that sort of gave you your grounding in private practice. And it wasn't all insolvency. It was actually the whole gamut.
It was the whole gamut, but I specialised in litigation primarily. Yeah, absolutely large. And the funny thing is, I've always done large litigation. So I find it really hard to do a plaintiff defendant piece of litigation. I've always done 5 parties, 6 parties. And I started on that. So it's really, that's what I learned.
But I said initially you saw the rope, and you also, well, you wanted to become a barrister, or were you actually happy with because I guess you have solicitors and barristers in the in Australia as well, but I think at some point you had a go at becoming a barrister.
Yeah, I did. And I probably should have done it earlier than I did do it. So again, it's the system.
That was after the 7 years that you were in the
Yeah.
boutique.
So I keep saying to the junior people here now, if you want to do it probably after 2 or 3 years, when you know enough to know something, but you don't know enough to be scared of what you don't know. So at 7 years, you already know what it is that you don't know. So I did, it was a great time, but I probably didn't do enough of a range of work at the bar because I sort of went, oh, I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about that. Whereas when you're a second or third year, you know nothing about everything. So you just give everything a go. But I don't regret doing it. Absolutely not. It was a fantastic course. It's given me a fantastic grounding. As I said before we came on, I'm sitting here doing submissions and I can actually talk to the barrister and I know exactly what they need as an instructor. I nearly went back to it, but no, not for me.
So what do you think is then the biggest difference between, being a solicitor and a barrister? And what was it that, attracted you to, becoming a barrister? Look, I'm new to it to a certain extent because I started in the Netherlands, then came to the UK, obviously got introduced to the system of barristers and solicitors. My understanding is that, already from, the very start, you either decide to be a barrister or a solicitor, not something that you sort of do a little bit later. But maybe in Australia, it's slightly different from how it is in the UK.
Yeah, so in Australia, it is slightly different. So you do an exam anytime. You can be 60, you can be 26. And if you pass an exam, you do the course and then you can go off and do your training. So you do pupillage, the equivalent of pupillage, for 9 months here. And then you're on your own, basically. But there's no sort of, you can't do it straight after university. You have to have your papers, so to speak, that you've qualified in general. And then you sit the exam and can go for it. I don't know the percentages of people that do it straight away from after graduating and doing their admission. But generally speaking, it's probably around this just senior associate level or late associate level that a lot of people go to the bar here.
Okay. So it was the Victoria bar that you went to, and I guess you have more opportunity to actually do advocacy in court. That is sort of the main difference, and maybe you're sort of more in the weeds on procedural stuff and basically front end of litigation as opposed to solicitors probably a little bit more back end of the litigation.
Yeah, so it depends. It depends how you run your practice, I guess. So I will be in the weeds a lot more if we just have a junior counsel running a trial, for example, and they don't have the support of a silk. So then they'll probably run the sort of silk part, and then I'll be the one that they bounce things off as the faux junior counsel. If we've got a huge team of barristers, then I'll probably be project managing more than doing any of that type of stuff. It really depends. We can have cases. I had one in Sydney a couple of years ago. We had 5 counsel. So it's,
Yeah.
It becomes project management.
And the big difference is also that, the solicitor is the one that actually faces the client most of all. And the barrister is sort of a little bit shielded from that dynamic of the case, which,
although I like parking the barrister in front of the client so that the client can actually point at them.
That's right. You need to have some armor in front of you sometimes.
They need to own I find that barristers need to own the brief from day one. If they own the brief from day one, then you're all in it together with the team.
Yeah, no, understood. But okay, so you did that a little bit later than you maybe should have done. But okay, it was a good, I guess, experience to know what you don't want to do and maybe to appreciate more what you're doing, which I guess for me is also, that is how you learn, right? Sometimes you need to do things that are not what you thought they would be, but they give you that little bit more knowledge and appreciation for what you're doing. So, so after that, you went back to private practice. Did you go back to the same firm, a different firm?
I went from my boutique to the bar. Then I went from the bar to Norton Rose, which was a national firm at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was the reason for that? You like bigger trials. You thought you have more profile in, a national firm. And I guess at that time, Norton Rose sort of had entered the market in Australia. It has since, we'll get to that, become one of the mega firms in the world. And that's where, you're at the moment, you came back later on. But at that point in time, it was a national firm.
At that point in time, it was national. I hadn't actually hadn't met Norton Rose yet. It was a very, very large Australian firm. It had offices, from memory, in Singapore and Indonesia, but they were affiliate offices. I actually knew the HR girl, and she said I really didn't want to go back to private practice at that point. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I did not know what I wanted to do. This will make you laugh. I actually even interviewed for Emirates as a flight attendant.
Look, so there was already, the drive to be more cross-border, to actually, leave Australia and, see the world, which, you obviously have done, and we'll get to that. But so that was already there. It's like, this is too small for me.
And the HR woman that rang me, because I can't even remember. I think I may have met her. I had a chat to her. I knew her from other firms. I knew her quite well. And she said, I think you need to meet this particular partner. They're not looking for a senior associate. They're looking for a third year. But I really think you need to meet this particular person. I was like, okay. So I went in, put a suit on, but I really didn't go in looking for desperate for a job. And this particular gentleman, who I still work for now, really wasn't that interested. He was a man in his mid-30s, and was doing the whole I'm a man in my mid-30s.
What do you want?
I'm going to swear, but not too badly. So he opened with something along the lines of, let's just get it out of the way. I don't hire dickheads. And I said, well, that would take out 99% of your market then, wouldn't it?
Great. Well, that's a good start. Good start of the conversation.
Sitting like this to sitting like this. So we've worked together on and off pretty much the last 18 years after that moment.
Wow, that's a great.
And we fight like cats and dogs.
But there's mutual respect on both sides.
And when it works, it really, really works.
That's great. That's great.
That's how it started. And I always remember that thinking, here we are.
So that shows you that, you're not afraid to take a risk, because obviously, that is, well, there's a little bit of risk attached to, a comeback like that.
I don't know what. It was the funniest interview. It was just like, you don't particularly want me. I don't particularly want you. She's like matchmaking.
We have to go through the motions, but there you go. So you started there, and you were hired as a litigator, or were you already then earmarked more for insolvency?
I was already earmarked for insolvency. I did quite a bit of insolvency at the bar. as a barrister. Not the technical insolvency that I do now, more the basic sort of more the debt recovery side, but I did do some preference claims and the litigation side of insolvency, not restructuring. And when I came to Norton Rose, it was just pre-GFC.
Yeah.
So it was a couple of years pre-GFC. So I had about
Great
18.
financial crisis, Lehman going down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody becoming a restructuring lawyer if you
Yeah.
weren't already.
So I got lucky. We do an Australian version of the INSOL course, but just local. So that's a year. That runs for a year. It's a university course. So I'd done that, come out the other side. So I'd had the litigation side already under wraps, had that restructuring side sort of sorted out in my head. And as I said, as I came out of that course, I know most of this stuff, but I didn't know why I did it. It was just that I did it because that's what you did. And then about, I think probably 6 to 9 months after that, things started falling like dominoes in Australia. And we were all on our own because I was a senior associate. There was just so much going on. It was just nuts.
Yeah. And that's also around the time that you did the INSOL, the Global Insolvency Practice course, right? So you were fully armed with all the qualifications in that space. So you did that for a while, but then I think, you sort of had looked, and in my mind, you're sort of one of the first to appreciate that maybe in the law business, there's also a space for freelance. That was like before, you have all the, platforms with consultants. You were sort of an early mover on that, on that track. How did that come about?
So I was pretty much burnt out after 4-ish years of GFC because it was just relentless. Like it really was relentless. And I wanted to spend more time with my relatives, so extended family in Europe. And 2-3 weeks of annual leave when you're coming from Australia is just not enough. It's a different lifestyle in Europe. I wanted that different lifestyle, wanted that ability to chill a bit more in Europe, but still do work. That wasn't an option where at Norton Rose. That was nothing that they'd ever seen before or heard about before. It was, and I quote, never going to happen.
Which I guess is maybe a feature of the sort of field of expertise we're in, right? It's feast or famine, and it's full on and very difficult to do in bite-sized chunks.
Yep. So I don't even know where I first heard about it, but people were doing it in the States. So there was freelancers starting up in the States. There are a couple of small platforms, and I just thought, well, what's going to happen? I'm not going to make money. So I started. I got my sole practitioner practicing certificate, and I just started ringing around and sending emails to contacts saying, happy to do your insolvency work.
And this is 2014, 13, 12. Wow.
12.
Okay.
Mid-12. I left mid-12. Rang contacts, so I'd look up when people were looking for employees. So we have something called seek.com. I'm not sure if you have that, but basically where they list all the jobs. And I'd go, oh, here's a sole practitioner that's looking for a ex-litigator. So I'd send an email saying, I don't want a full-time job, but I'm happy to work for you for 3 months, 6 months. And often what you'd find is they didn't particularly want a full-time senior associate anyway, but they'd had a new piece of litigation that had blown up and they needed somebody immediately. So it just mushroomed from there. I got a couple of really good consulting jobs with small firms that basically had a complete lot of work coming through to me all the time. And then I ended up doing the debt recovery for a liquidation that I'd done the winding up on. and then they were recovering the loan book at the other end. And that was for a very large mid-tier firm in Australia. So I cut a deal with them that I would be overseas. So I was doing this while I was actually living overseas as well. So I was living in Italy, running my matters from Australia on Skype at that time.
Wow. And with all the time difference,
Yep.
And again, also 2012, I'm sort of, trying
Skype.
to, compare with
Yeah.
when I decided to do DCQ, it was, 2018. And since, it's been a lot easier to sort of set up your own business. But in 2012, it was probably just a lot more difficult still to sort of, become an entrepreneur, right? Because that's, if you're always, you started off in a boutique, which obviously maybe gives you already a sense. But in large law firms, you're just, in a team, you're doing your stuff. You have no idea what it is to run a law firm and what is, all involved if you run a business. How did you sort of deal with that? Because that's, that's not nothing.
I'm hopeless at admin, so I was hopeless in debt collection, which is ironic given I'm in insolvency.
Is the doctor, who is always, helping
Sick.
the patients, but not really looking after yourself.
Yeah. So that was probably my hardest thing. And one of the reasons I gave it away is just the administration is just a nightmare to actually keep up. And also I got so busy on occasions. I had 2 people working for me, actually helping me doing other people's work.
Yep.
So that was, it was interesting. The cold calling was really interesting and probably gave me a lot of confidence. I got a lot more confidence being on my own than I did ever in a law firm, because I didn't realize that people actually knew who I was and what I did and that I could do these things, and they were willing to actually give you a go at doing these things. So there's the big mid-tier that gave me effectively a contract to run a team of 7, it was about 6 or 7 associates, senior associates doing this debt recovery project. They didn't care. They just said, you do you. You have to come back continuously. So I came back sort of every 6 to 8 weeks for a week to talk to the staff, be on board with the staff. And I'd log into the Skype meetings. I'd make sure that I was in all of their meetings. It was my problem for the time zones. And it just really, really worked. And the clients that worked with me during that big period, now when I say I'm going overseas, they're just like, yeah. And they're just so used to it.
Well, and this is pre-COVID, right? This is
Way pre-COVID.
2012. This is, everything now, it sounds like, obviously, but at that point in time, far from obviously, everything has changed sufficiently since. So you're in Europe. You have 2 people working you in Australia. You're doing primarily Australian work, or did
All
you do
Australian
like
work.
international work? No.
All Australian work. And it was one huge project. So we ran, up until 2014, I was doing a lot of advices, settling court documents, things like that. When I took the large consultancy, we ran 1,300 proceedings, and it was managing. I'd wake up and have, a couple of 100 emails, and we developed a system with the associates where they amongst themselves would actually put what was urgent, what wasn't urgent, what could wait until 5 o'clock their time, things like that. But it was really great for the associates as well, because they had only 4 hours every day with the time zones where they had to manage themselves, and they actually really did well.
Wow. So giving the opportunity. And how was the court system at that point in time? It wasn't sort of very virtual at that time. So you really need to have boots on the ground to actually do what you need to do.
Yeah, so I would time, generally speaking, because what we do, say for if there's an injunction, generally speaking, I could time coming back around court dates. So I'd come back sort of every 4 to 6 weeks. So I was doing a lot of long haul flying. I think only once we had almost a situation where I came back within sort of 48 hours. But generally speaking, it was fine. And because I was in a big law firm, if there was really an emergency, there were plenty of partners around or counsel around that could actually jump in. I always had barristers around. Everyone thought it was quite funny when they'd ring up and they'd say, "Where are you today?" "I'm in New York," or "I'm in Croatia," or "I'm in Italy."
So you got a real taste for, I guess, cross-border international life doing this, and actually starting your own venture was the key to open that door and experience, I guess, a different life from the life that you've had so far, in the profession that you were doing. And it was, you were able to actually balance it. Or was it, it was sort of a temporary thing because at a certain point in time, you decided to, go back to, what you've actually, said goodbye to. But maybe again with the benefit of some real experience that you had doing something, completely different.
Yeah. Look, I probably wouldn't have stayed a consultant forever, but I don't ever discount that I wouldn't go back and do it again. It can be lonely. That's one negative. That was why it was really good going backwards and forwards with the teams. Um, I definitely learnt so much about probably myself. I backed myself so much more. Like I back myself so much more now. I've got so much more confidence. I sort of learnt in a law firm, in a very large law firm, you you're in a hierarchy and you are basically placed in a position. When you're out there on your own, you realize that that position internally may not have been exactly right. That was just somewhere you were placed, and you sort of go, well, hey, I'm much better than those three people over there, and those three people over there are sort of anointed as being wonderful. And you sort of get a much better perspective of understanding where your place in the world of law really is.
Yeah,
And that's both domestically and internationally.
yeah.
Because internationally, I'd go to conferences and I'd think, "Oh, yeah, they're from New York. They must be fantastic." And then I'd go, "Ooh, okay, maybe they're not that fantastic, or maybe I'm not as inferior as I may have thought I was." But it's that just everything opens up your eyes when you're on your own and you have to fend for yourself, and you get to meet people just as being you, as opposed to being someone attached to a particular brand name.
Yeah. So being master of your own destiny,
Yeah,
is probably the most scary, but maybe also the most rewarding thing. I find that definitely starting, a boutique myself. And again, I think one thing that I also can very much resonate with, if you're in a large, law firm, you're easily indoctrinated to look at the world, from that position and
yeah,
put, everything outside of your law firm easily in boxes, right? Based on prejudice or whatever it is.
yeah,
And then if you see somebody who is not from, a brand name, easily you can put them in a box like, oh, that's inferior. But actually, if you just, be on the other side, you look at the large law firms and everything around there, that bit, but also now the other bit, actually, it well, it grounds you a lot more, and all of
yeah,
a sudden you are a lot more, open to actually listen to what it is that this person that is maybe not in a recognizable brand is doing, has to offer, and actually yours, in my mind, a lot of the times really surprised that there's so much more, behind that you wouldn't have listened to or observed if you were still in the large law firm. So
yeah.
it opens up your mind tremendously, I find.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And controversially, I've said subsequently that I think partners should always do a partner exchange with another law firm to see what happens in other law firms.
Mm. I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to it. Do you think, because this is sort of, one thing that I'm thinking about now is for our space. how important do you think it is to have, had an opportunity to run your own business? Because we're dealing with businesses in financial distress. There's a lot of pressure and sort of, you know, it's a special space, hence special situations. But if you have never actually, run a business yourself, can you relate to what it is that is on the other side? And do you think it's necessary to have that, or is it just a nice to have, but it's not necessary?
I think not only running a business, but working in a business is probably sufficient, because I probably got most of my skills from working part-time in high school and university, because I understand how a business works, but then the next step is running that business. So I often say when we recruit graduates, have they worked in hospitality or retail, to actually understand how our business works and operates, and not only to understand the balance sheets and things like that, but just the pressure points of managing people and managing competing obligations of, it's just customer service. Just, there's so many dynamics, especially in what we do in the special situations space, that it's not just the financials, the law. It's really people. So
Yeah.
I think it's really, really, really important. And as I say, not just from running my own business, but working in a business.
Yeah. So you've done that. What was it, like 2012 to the
17.
time that you 17, the time that you decide to actually go back to the old firm, who, but at that time had changed a lot. It had become massive, and at the moment is truly massive. What sort of what was the reason for that? And yeah, you've been there now since, right? So that's clearly it was a decision that worked.
Back to the mothership, as I called it.
Back to the mothership, calling in.
Look, I don't know. I mean, law firms are law firms. You get to a certain level, a certain age, and you sort of think, do I go to another law firm, or do I stick with what I know? At that point in time, I stuck with what I knew. There wasn't a spot for me in restructuring. I went back to litigation because I can pivot. So I worked with somebody else in litigation, and I sort of helped out at a senior level on a whole lot of other matters. And then I ended up back in insolvency when sort of work, peaks and troughs. So I ended up there. But why did I go back to Norton Rose? It's probably the people. I think that's fundamentally. I'm supposed to say it's the best firm in the world, but it's the people.
Well, look, that's a good opinion to have, right? And probably they are for certain people.
Yeah,
so
it's
that's
the
good.
people and the team, and a lot of the team was still here. So that's always a good indication of the firm more generally. A lot of the same people were here. I've been complaining recently. Another counsel came back, did a similar stint somewhere else, and came back, and she got all the bells and whistles of induction and training. And I said, I just got given a laptop and got told to bill. This is not fair.
Well, yeah, exactly. But again, so back to Australia then. You sort of had the international travel and living abroad out of your system and get back to Australia. No,
part of the deal when I came back was I would continue to travel to some extent, but I would build it around conferences and building my expertise around the firm's brand in restructuring. So at that point in time, I'd already was relatively established with the INSOL networks. I also do stuff with the IBA. I do stuff with INSOL Europe. And fortuitously, leading on to what you were saying earlier about crypto, I came back in 2017, and by the end of 2017, I'd written my first article on crypto and insolvency, and it pretty much took off really quickly after that.
So 2017, what was sort of the focus on that? That's it. What I've seen as well, and maybe just before we go into crypto, you have an interest in EU insolvency law as well, because you've
Yep.
done an LLM in Paris, and then later on you do another LLM, or I don't know what the timing exactly is, but there is definitely you do one in Italy as well, right? So maybe tell us about that part, because obviously being in Australia, how does European Union insolvency law comes into your offering?
Probably that's a special interest. So I've got an interest in international law and cross-border law, and I wanted to do European Union law because I had a taste of it when I went to the Sorbonne. So my first master's was international and comparative law, so I actually used the EU as the comparator, so to speak. And it was really interesting because it's almost as if some of the EU law, as opposed to, so a lot of people don't understand, you do, but a lot of people don't understand, EU law is in and of itself. It's not Italian law, German law, French law. It is a thing. But I thought that it took up the best bits of a lot of the civil law and the common law jurisdictions. And so it was really interesting. Primarily at the start was competition law, because I found that, because I did my first thesis in undergraduate on competition law. So I found that really interesting. And that also to some extent marries into insolvency as well, with when you're restructuring and have to pass things through with the mergers, etc. So then during COVID, I hated being locked down in Australia. I don't know that everybody knows, but Melbourne was the most locked down place in the world. So I applied for a specialist course at Luiss Guido Carli. They only had 15 or 16 people in that course, and we were all specialists in our field.
And it was English, or do you speak Italian?
It was Italian, English, and notwithstanding it was supposed to be taught in English, it was taught in Italian and English with a smattering of French, and my French is rubbish.
So the study in Sorbonne was English. It wasn't forced French.
No, that wasn't French. No, that was in English. So it was actually quite funny because, as you know, a lot of university professors are very stuck in their ways, and so it is all taught in English. It's all fine, and so my Italian's fine. I mean, I write terribly, but comprehension is fine. So it was like, oh yeah, whatever. But then when one of the teachers was speaking French, I'm like, I'm going to die. And the worst thing was she called on me to basically discuss this one case, one of their ECJ judgments. And I said, look, I'm sorry, that was one of the only ones I didn't read because it's in French. And she said, and? I said, well, I don't speak French and this is an English course. And she said, well, there'll be 4 French judgments next week and I expect you to have read all of them. So I had...
Oh, dear. Yeah.
So I had the ECJ cases, which any of my European friends know come in multiple languages. I had them set out in English, Italian, just to try and figure out what the French had actually said. So I was sort of interpreting across 3 different law cases, trying to figure this out. And then the following week, that horrible professor never called on me ever again.
So you need to survive. But okay, I mean, I guess part of being cross-border is to deal with different cultures, to deal with different languages. Language is obviously a big part of the culture. And I guess in Europe, French is pretty sort of dominant still, right? As the antidote to English. In many ways.
And with the older people, they're really bonded to French. It was quite funny, that course, because one of the university professors actually asked me all about my opinions on Brexit and why we had voted against it. And I had to explain to him that I wasn't English. I was Australian.
You didn't have a vote. You may have an opinion, but not a vote. Yeah, exactly. Hey, Lee, one of the things that, I'm also very interested in, comparing sort of what has happened over the the span of the career so far. I do it, and this is sort of the reason for the podcast in the first place, to sort of reflect on things, then see where we are and look forward, what is still to come. For you, you've decided to, enter into, I guess, a specialization that at least 30 years ago when I started was very, white male dominated. And obviously, you've made it this far. So you actually was able to manage, that environment. And I know that these days, diversity, equity, and inclusion is sort of toxic, but at the same time, whatever you call it, it's something that you need to deal with, and we can call it whatever it is. You have your own experience. I also saw that on your LinkedIn, you had this one clip for a couple of years ago where a guy, was sort of, for one day, experiencing what a woman was experiencing day to day, which is sort of eye-opening. I mean, is that something you experienced? Can you maybe give a little bit of a flavor as to how it was for you to sort of, find your own space in quite a male-dominated specialization that has changed a lot, and I think for the good?
I have to be careful here.
We all need to be careful, but say it in the terms that you're comfortable with. I think it is something that we need to discuss. I find one of the big problems with today's day is that anything that is a little bit sensitive, we can't say anything about. And I know you're in this large law firm and what have you, so say it in the way you want to say it.
It's look, I've definitely faced sexism. It's definitely changed. It's probably hasn't changed as much as it should. It still goes on. It's changing. It's definitely not as bad as it used to be. So when I was a graduate, I remember going to court for the first time with the male partner and being introduced to another male partner of another large law firm, who looked at me and said to the other partner, whilst I was standing there, "Oh, and she's got braids too, has she?" And it was just extraordinary that was okay. Now, there's no way that'd be okay now. And most definitely things have changed, but that was 25 years ago. So it wasn't that long ago. Like it was pretty, pretty close. How did I manage it? Look, I'm pretty robust, as you know. That's why I've ended up in insolvency.
You need to be a little bit robust, right?
You need to be robust. And look, to be fair, I've said this to a lot of the junior females. Notwithstanding, a lot of the older gents should be more aware of the way that they come across. I sometimes say, if you tell them and they still do it, it's a problem. If you don't pull them up on it and you just, snitch behind their backs, they may not even know that they're doing it, whatever it is that they're doing. And I mean, there's levels of that. I'm talking things like talking over you in a meeting or, things like that. I mean, there's levels of appropriateness, of course. And yet definitely like there's your bawdy jokes. There's, being a little bit inappropriate, like having brothers. And that's the type of stuff that insolvency goes on all the time. And as I said, I'm pretty robust. If I said to one of the guys that I work with a lot, "Hey, that's not okay," I think a lot of them would be mortified. So I think that's probably the way that I've dealt with a few of those things. You call it out for what it is. Don't embarrass people. Because as I said, a lot of people just don't even know that you're not okay with that anymore. And then in some ways, I also think that maybe sometimes people are a little, they go the wrong way. They go completely the opposite way. And it's taken a bit of fun out of things as well. Because as I said, I mean, it's like having brothers. I'll make the insolvency course that I did as an example. So INSOL 2010, I was the only female in the room. You would have had the same probably with Jane or Sam. I can't remember. We were the
I think Sam too. Yeah, Sam in our class. Obviously, she showed us all, who the boss was because she was the top
exactly.
dog, and
Um,
did better than any of us.
but yeah, man, how did we manage being the only female in the room? It wasn't an issue for me. It never was an issue for me. I mean, all the guys were great. Were they a bit bawdy? Were they boys? As in, like in a boys' school or in a boys' high school? Absolutely. But I wasn't that sensitive to the issues. They were never inappropriate. And if there was any inappropriateness, I would have called it out. And that's been the way that it's been going forward. That's sort of what I say to the more junior female. It's hard when there's a power imbalance. That's the biggest issue.
Yeah.
Um,
And do you think that the generation now has it easier or more difficult? I think from my perspective, it also has created a lot of confusion amongst, I guess, the next generation of men. It's like, what can we still do, right?
yeah.
It's sort of, it isn't clear, and if people are zooming in on everything, and everything is easily picked out and out of context, then a lot of stuff can look very, very bad if you don't see the whole context of it, right? And yeah, I don't know. I'm not envying anybody to sort of navigate these waters these days.
No, I agree. I find that a lot of the young, and again, it's a generalization because there's the spectrum of all of this. But a lot of the younger guys who maybe want to hold a door open, for example, for a female because that's how they've been brought up by their mother who says you must be courteous to women, hold the door open, then they're not sure. Do they not? Am
Yeah.
I insulting? So, as I said, I find talking to the younger females in the office, I generally say, communicate. If there's something that is offending you, again, within the realms of appropriateness, then communicate with that person, call it out. But it does take a lot. And as I said, it becomes much, much more difficult where there's power imbalances.
Yeah, yeah. So what is, I guess, looking back at your career so far, what is in our space the thing that has changed the most, for you?
In regard to diversity or just in
No,
general?
just general. I mean, diversity is obviously one of the things that that is there, but are there other things that sort of changed a lot?
The acceptance of remote working, that's the biggest change that I think. The acceptance of remote working, the acceptance of being able to do your job pretty much anywhere within reason. Yes, you still have to go to court, but I mean, even that's virtual. I'm in Vienna next week. My junior will be doing the submissions and I'll be watching it on screen with a link. So it's like I don't need to be there. Cross-border insolvency has increased so much, especially with the new digital stuff. And also just people are more aware that those things are available.
Yeah.
So globalization has, I think, pushed our space definitely into cross-border, a lot more cross-border insolvency. And then the females pushing through into partnership roles in both law and accounting is definitely a huge thing. We're seeing a lot of females in Australia now pushing through, and very big supporters are the men for the last generation pushing them through. So, and that's great. But again, as to say to you, that's not to sort of emphasize the females over the males, because a lot of the guys that are coming through are great as well.
Yeah, but okay, it's if you're too extreme on these things and you want to sort of catch up, it's almost like a little bit of a zero-sum game, right? If you focus on, gender, for example, then, if you don't have the gender, but you have all the other qualities, and obviously there's a history, you're sort of a little bit personally feeling I'm collateral damage for whatever
Yeah.
happens, and I'm sort of so it's a fine balance there, and not easy to navigate, but I do think that continuously talking about it, listening to both sides, and not sort of make it black and white and good and bad. There's a lot more nuance in it, but it is something that we need to address, right? And again, it's so the point you're making about awareness, right? Um, uh, I had that when I was a student in Rotterdam, and I sort of, was active in Youth Against Racism. And, that was a big thing. And went to gatherings and what have you. And then I speak with, black people that just are part of this as well. And they're saying, well, great to see you here. But you'll have the opportunity to decide when you're going to be active and when not. I go out of the door every day, and whether I like it or not, I'm confronted with it, and it's the whole day and every day, and that is the big difference. So it's very hard for you to realize how significant some of these things are. And I guess, it's the same thing with gender, right?
Yeah.
You go out of the door, whether you're, up for it or not, it's going to happen.
Yeah, look, and I guess that's probably the negative of coming through the system, as I call it, when I did, is the stuff that I will put up with and continue to put up with. And I don't even think I'm putting up with it because it's just something that I've grown up with, is far different to what the next generation coming through will tolerate. I still get talked over in meetings. It's on occasion. And I sort of roll my eyes and move on, whereas the next generation are aghast at that. If there's a young female associate in the room and she'll come out and say, oh, X spoke over you. And I'm sort of like, yeah, X does that all the time. But why didn't you say something? And it's become, as I said, I'm conditioned in a way which is not necessarily correct, but there's definitely a generational change where things that we just put up with and just got on with is just not tolerated any longer, which is probably a good thing within reason, because you also, as you mentioned, don't want to start a war between the sexes unnecessarily.
No, exactly. And we're all human. And again, as you said, trying to deal with it where you allow people to save face, which again is, going back to our, specialization. Isn't that one of the big keys of success in special sits, is that you can, deal with the various stakeholders and find a way not to embarrass anybody and being too extreme on one side and coming up with something that, maybe makes everybody a little bit unhappy, but it is quote unquote fair and workable. Because if you're, too much one way or too much the other way, it's very difficult to get, agreement on anything, right?
Yeah, you got to balance your stakeholders' interests. You always have to be aware of all the different stakeholders, all the different personalities and the egos, because especially when you're doing the bigger stuff, oh my God, putting some of those egos in a room, CEOs and chairmen and senior bankers, etc. That is a very big navigational game. And going back to gender, I probably shouldn't say this, but that is where you probably, you do have an advantage if you can sometimes just zip your lip for a moment and get on with it, basically. Again, within reason, because there's always reasons, but sometimes being bullish and confronting things head on is not going to get the overall objective with all of your stakeholders together. Absolutely right there.
No, and again, that's maybe also why diverse teams and sort of, having various ways of dealing with things all at the table, works. But okay, everything takes adjustment. So crypto, Bitcoin was launched in 2009. You wrote your first sort of, piece on it in 2017. There was a big, I guess, insolvency in Japan. Mount Gox was there in 2014. For those that are, not so familiar with that space, and to be really honest, one of the things that I've actually noticed with my own kids and sort of the next generation coming up, it seems that they are a lot more focused on, Bitcoin, crypto, because it's so difficult to get on the property ladder, which was the normal thing for us to do, that it seems that the next generation is very much focused on that space. And maybe it is, an alternative to, getting a property or a shortcut or whatever. So it is very live. And when I was saying, look, I'll have a conversation with Lee today to, my boys, they're like, oh, crypto? That's very interesting. I'd like to know everything about it. So maybe we can sort of unpack this a little bit and see, how did you get into it? And what are sort of the main themes that people need to be aware of? Because a lot has happened, especially, in 2022, with the crypto winter. And so there's a lot. So maybe just, tell us, how did you get focused on this?
It was a dare.
as it should be.
I was bored. So I'd just come back to Norton Rose. I was bored because I was, as I said, I was helping out in bits and pieces. And I went and spoke to a partner and said, what am I going to do? I'm bored. It was around December. It was that funny period where it's just before you get the Christmas special, as we call it, the Christmas injunction or the Christmas collapse.
Like today, right? The 1st of December.
Around then. And he said, just write an article on something. I'm like, on what? It's like, I don't know, think of something. So I went and started digging on new stuff. And I can't even remember how it came up, but this cryptocurrency stuff had come up. And I'd sort of heard about it, but not really understood it. And I started reading it. It was magic. It was this magic digital asset, this magic asset class that was never going to go down. It was always going to make money. And it was wonderful. And it's like, I've done enough insolvency to know what goes up always comes down. And so I started digging around, how to deal with cryptocurrency and insolvency. And there was no one that had written anything on it. So I toddled back into the office and said, cryptocurrency, it's rubbish. It's not a thing, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, well, let's pretend it is a thing. Let's just assume it is a thing. What would we want to know if it would collapse? And so we sort of bounced around. What would we want to know and how would we apply real principles? It was just, it was half an hour discussion and we came up with sort of the 4 pillars, as I call them: identification, preservation, realization, distribution. And so I wrote a paper on those 4 topics. Here you go. And the only thing I had to go on was Mt. Gox and where it was at that point in time, and applying Australian law principles at that time with a little bit of cross-border insolvency, because I fully understood that it was a borderless business, to this new asset class. And I wrote that paper, and I can't even remember where it got published. I think it was the IBA. It was got published. And the next thing I knew, I was on the bill to talk at an IBA conference in Amsterdam, actually.
Oh, wow. Wow. So maybe Mt. Gox, can you, for those that actually don't know that was sort of, the original case, it seems. And it's been going on for a while, right? Because I think distributions have only happened very recently. Well, how did, this first big casualty come about?
Mt. Gox was probably the Lehman Brothers of crypto before crypto winter. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was billions. It was a hack. So there's sort of been 2 lots of crypto insolvencies, the ones up to 2022 and the ones post 2022. Up to 22, it was hacks, security breaches. And how hacks basically work is you don't hold cryptocurrency per se, you hold private keys. So think of them as a PIN number. And they live in a digital wallet, and you can either have them offline or you can have them online. Most people are lazy and they have this digital wallet, almost like a file, like you see a file in your computer, and you have inside of those your digital keys. If they're online, they can be hacked. Simple as that. Anything online can be hacked, and people are lazy, so they keep everything online. And so someone hacked effectively the digital keys of the Mt. Gox organization, because what happens in a really snapshotty type way is when you're trying to swap fiat currency or dollars and cents for cryptocurrency, you pay into the digital currency exchange, similar to a stock market or a bank in some ways, and they swap.
It's like a
Over.
foreign exchange. It's like,
Yeah,
you
for an
know, I'm,
exchange. So
I'm
they give you,
getting dollars into euros,
yeah,
but I'm
into
getting like crypto
Bitcoin.
into fiat
Yeah.
currency. Yeah.
And so you don't get a token per se, but you get a line entry on the blockchain. And to access that line entry and to transfer that line entry to somebody else, technically, if there's any crypto people watching, they're going to say, technically, she's incorrect. You can't actually transfer. You have to do it. But let's just
Let's keep it simple, so that we can all understand, or at least follow the
yeah.
thread.
So you effectively need this key to move your value from one person to the next person. And so whilst the crypto is held on the exchange or by the exchange, all of the keys are held together. So someone comes along and hacks the wallet of the exchange and takes all the keys, and they can then control all of the crypto. And that's really what happened at Mt. Gox to begin with. Sure, there was a whole lot of alleged embezzlement and fraud, and there always is in some of these early crypto matters. A lot of that's to do with whether it's intentional or not, the commingling of the company's assets with the actual individual's assets, which we see in traditional insolvencies as well. So there's nothing new there. But yeah, so Mt. Gox lost millions and millions. It went into bankruptcy. And it was the first Japanese bankruptcy that actually they brought it out of bankruptcy because the way that it had happened in 2014, I can't remember how much crypto was, but it wasn't very much. Let's call it $100. By the time they went to sell it, it had gone up to, I don't know, $10,000. So by the time they started realizing the assets, the company was no longer insolvent because the assets had
So was
actually
this Bitcoin? Was this Bitcoin primarily?
predominantly Bitcoin and something called Bitcoin Cash. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I read somewhere that they started off with like quite a sizable amount, like 6.5 billion or something,
Billion, yeah.
which
It's I can't
10 years
remember.
later was sort of what is it like
Trillions.
54 billion, or
Yeah.
I mean, it's grown a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the numbers were out of this world. And so they had to pull it out of insolvency per se because it wasn't insolvent any longer when they were realizing the assets. But they didn't pull it out to actually allow it to continue to trade on. They pulled it out to allow the distributions to occur, essentially. But it was a great case because it had a lot of the early issues. So, for example, proofs of debt. People lost Bitcoin. They didn't lose dollars and cents. What legislation actually allows you to distribute Bitcoin? I mean, there's no
Yeah.
legislation.
And what is Bitcoin,
What is
right? I mean,
Bitcoin?
one
Yeah.
of the big things seems to be, what is it? Is it,
Yeah, it's a
as we
property.
know, property? Is it security? Is it
Yeah.
commodity? What is it? Because that in our space is quite
Yeah.
important to be able to qualify it, right?
Yeah. And the UK, so Japan wasn't great at that, but they've got some quirky laws around what can be held in trust and things like that. So that was sort of slightly askew with the property question. The UK jumped in with that. And funnily enough, New Zealand, they were one of the next sort of biggest crypto collapses in Cryptopia. And they actually did a really good deep dive into that question as to what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general is. And so they came up with the idea that it was property. So they were one of the first in the common law jurisdictions. They did an awesome job at doing it. And the UK since then have got a lot of judgments, a lot in the criminal space. freezing orders and Norwich Fabrical, that type of nature, those orders.
And why are they important, like freezing orders? Because what you were saying, it's hackers, right? So we don't know who they are. They ran off with everything, but we need to go after them. So, what you then do is go and freeze assets. But
Yep,
again, if you don't know who they are, you need to do it persons unknown, which
that's
is,
right.
again, tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really tricky and it differs by jurisdiction. But generally speaking, the common law countries, as I said, have done it really well. And the other thing that most insolvency professionals don't realize is how quickly you lose your assets, because they can go, if you've got a phone and you've got a wallet on the phone, it's as simple as sending an email. It's that quick. So you can move the assets that quickly. Um, so
and,
yeah,
and and large amounts. There's no restriction
yeah.
to there's not like a security alert that comes, oh, you've done quite a large transaction, is this okay?
And the other thing is you can't reverse out the transactions. So sometimes when you do insolvency, you can go to the bank and say, well, actually, that shouldn't have been transferred over. Can you please reverse it back? I'm now the liquidator. You can't reverse out the blockchain. The blockchain only goes one way, only goes forwards. So you can get compensation, absolutely, but you can't actually reverse that transaction. So for things like preference claims, avoidance claims, you're always looking at compensation and damages.
So for people who don't know what a blockchain is, I mean, is there a simple explanation from what a blockchain is as opposed to what we normally do? How does it then sort of change the insolvency if we're dealing with blockchain?
So a couple of things for insolvency. I need a picture to do my blockchain, but I'll try my best. So the blockchain is, it's a series, effectively it's a series of computers around the world. Anybody can download well, there's a number of blockchains. Blockchain is not unique. Bitcoin has its blockchain. Ethereum has its blockchain. So, and they're almost like a massive ledger. So very short example, if I wanted to move the value of my cryptocurrency to you, Peter, I would have my private key and a public key. You would have a public key and you would say, here's my public key, or you would, through the wallet software, because we all have wallet software where we download and use cryptocurrency, you would notify me of your public key, which is effectively like your account number.
Yeah.
And I would be able to shoot that through the wallet software. And as it's going through, and this is on the assumption that I'm going direct from me to you, not through an exchange, so not through a bank or some sort of intermediary.
Yeah.
So I press the appropriate button. That's probably the easiest way to say it. And in the ether, all the computers that are attached to that blockchain do a series of algorithmic computations, really. So they're continuously doing this arithmetic, and 3 times they have to get the right combination between the numbers that I'm sending and the numbers that you're supposed to accept. And once that's done, the blockchain locks it on, and that locks it as a transaction. So it's sort of really hard to explain. It's like in the ledger, whilst 3 people check that that's correct, 1, 2, 3. Once that's actually determined as correct by the computers, it puts it on the ledger and you get your line entry at your end, Peter, and then you have to use your private key, which is effectively your PIN number, to release that value into your control. There's a whole lot of other stuff that goes on there.
But then there is a record of this that you
Yep.
can't change, and it gives
No.
you can sort of see the chain, and it's there set in stone.
But remember, it's set in stone with an alphanumeric number. It's not set in stone that Lee transferred to Peter.
Either no.
Yeah, so then you've got all of your asset tracing professionals that have to come along and decipher whose number belongs to who, because it's pseudo-anonymous. It's not truly anonymous. And as time's gone on, people have gotten very good at actually unpacking that pseudo-anonymity and actually tracing through. The other thing that people have to remember is you don't necessarily have to transfer one Bitcoin. You can transfer a portion of that Bitcoin. So asset tracing in our space becomes really hard, because if you want to be clever and hide your assets, you transfer one Bitcoin to me, then I transfer one a portion here, a portion there, a portion there, and then those portions get broken down further, and you can go down. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's about 64 times. So piecing it
Okay.
together is really difficult.
Yeah. And so that whole system is still subject to hacking, because
Yeah,
the whole idea is that it's safe, but as you said, anything in in the ether is actually not safe, because there are always smart people who can hack it, and that was, I guess, the reason for, I guess, the early collapses, is that somebody hacked it and stole it, and therefore all of a sudden whoever was running it was left in financial distress,
yeah.
and that's it.
So once you get hold of those private keys, so effectively all the PIN numbers, you can release the value to you.
Yeah.
Um,
And you
so that
can't freeze that quickly, because in banking, you have your card. Your card is stolen. They have the PIN number, but you can quickly go on your app and just freeze your card. That's not how it works in the blockchain.
No, it works a little easier if you've got an intermediary. So those digital currency exchanges, the Binances, the FTX, dare I say it? Bless it, rest in peace, FTX.
Yeah.
But all of those, it makes it a lot easier, because it takes us back into the traditional space that we're more familiar with, that you have somebody to actually go and subpoena, or to freeze, or to serve a court
Yeah.
procedure on. If you're just doing what they call peer-to-peer, that becomes quasi impossible,
Yeah.
because there's no intermediary, there's no one to serve, there's a pseudo-anonymous code there. The fortunate thing and unfortunate. So fortunate for people like you and me who work in the traditional space that want to be able to sort of quasi understand it. Unfortunate for the people that are really cryptocurrency oriented, is that as it gets more and more commercialized, it's morphing a lot more into the traditional finance model of intermediaries, of having wacky and zany types of financial products. They're just being backed in crypto. So it's something that you can actually get your head around. But in saying that, you also have, there's sort of like two schools. There's one school that's actually gone into what's called DeFi, which is decentralized finance, and that's really taking off as well. So you have decentralized lenders where there's just no intermediaries at all, and loans are being given in crypto, securities being given in crypto. There's smart contracts that if your collateral drops below a certain level because of the volatility of crypto, then the lender can actually just suck that crypto out automatically without giving you a notice or anything like that. But there's two.
So it all sort of happens automatically. I mean, the whole reason for having crypto in the first place is to make it easier to transact, right? That was the reason, so that you're not stuck with old-fashioned
Bank.
banks that make you pay for every step, takes very long, and sort of you can't do with your own money what you want to do. So therefore, they create, I guess, not fiat currency, but this cryptocurrency, and it sits nowhere, as you say. It's borderless, but that's why it is also very hard to, I guess, monitor, and it wasn't monitored. Um, why? Because now, I guess, fast forward to 2022, the collapses that took place. I think the outcry is this should be regulated much more, but I guess it wasn't regulated. Why? Because the risks are, the big risks are, it's anti-money laundering and it's terrorist funding, and it wasn't. What I understand, it wasn't regulated because they gave it a chance to actually, grow first, and plus only regulate it when it's, meaningful in the sense that it has a role to play in the economy.
I think a lot of people didn't realize how quickly it was moving and how much the market cap was growing. There was a lot of people in the industry, so I dipped my toe in with the actual industry players themselves, and they want regulation. A lot of them want regulation because they want
Okay,
to know,
yeah.
well, they want to know their parameters.
Mm.
So, for example, in Australia, do they fit in within the financial services requirements to actually have to tick the boxes on all of the financial services legislation? They had no idea. So there was, notwithstanding, there's absolutely anti-money laundering, there's counter finance terrorism, all the rest of it. There's a lot of legitimate players in the market as well that don't necessarily want to do the wrong thing. So there were a lot of people that wanted regulation. There was a lot of people that didn't understand it. So everything moves relatively slowly at the regulatory level globally. I don't think that's unique to any particular country. And I think the crypto winter really kicked it off because people globally realized the size of these exchanges, the types of businesses, the volume of money that was going through them, and the interaction also with traditional finance, because you grabbed a couple of those smaller American banks in there as well. So it became a real problem.
Can you explain, how the crypto winter sort of started? Because was it? Am I right in saying that was Voyager the first one that went,
No, it
and then
was
there was?
Three Arrows Capital.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Three Arrows Capital. So Terra Luna well, this is all debatable, but the way it looks like it started is Terra Luna was what's called a stable coin. So stable coins generally have a fixed asset. So rather than Bitcoin, which is a fungible token, more like cash, stable coins are a cryptocurrency, which usually is asset backed, so a US dollar backed. So it actually tries to balance out that volatility that Bitcoin has. It sort of bounces up and down because there's no asset behind it. So Terra Luna was a stable coin that collapsed. Now, the problem with Terra Luna was it wasn't so stable because its asset that was backing it was another cryptocurrency. So not so stable.
That
And
sounds a little bit like 2008, where
yeah,
we have all these very distressed notes that you put together, and all of a sudden they are
yeah. You pull the
investment
pin.
grade rated.
Yeah. So Terra Luna collapsed, and Three Arrows Capital, which was a hedge fund, had massive exposure to Terra Luna. They had a lot of Terra Luna on their books. They then, and this is, a lot of people don't really understand, and again, I need my picture, that the cascading or contagion effect that this had, because the actual industry was lending within itself. So it wasn't actually using traditional finance. So Three Arrows Capital couldn't pay back Voyager because Voyager had actually lent to Three Arrows, I can't remember off the top of my head, it's about 600 million from memory. Then
Big sums.
Voyager couldn't pay back the next one. Then we had FTX that was also in trouble. We had BlockFi that was also in trouble. And it was generally because they were so interrelated with their lending. There was also another phenomena which we had during the GFC in Greece, and I think Ireland to some extent. We had bank runs. So notwithstanding that those exchanges weren't banks, as soon as there was a sniff of a problem, you had all of the users that were previously depositing their either their cryptocurrency or their fiat currency to convert into cryptocurrency into these exchanges that wanted to immediately withdraw all of
Yeah.
those assets again.
In
And
the UK, we had the famous Northern Rock bank run, right? Everybody,
yeah,
all of a sudden, word goes out.
and the same thing happened, but it was a lot quicker because you do it on the app. You don't have to line up at the teller. you do it on the app. So it was simultaneously. And the other thing that people don't understand is it's global. So they trade 24 hours. So you could have been doing it all night, and it was this continuous outflow of funds. And then without the regulation, there was no requirement to keep a particular amount of cryptocurrency or fiat currency available for these bank runs. And there's almost fractionalized banking going on in some of these exchanges where they don't keep anything like 20% or 10% on chain. They then invest everything else behind the scenes to another exchange. So they can't even get them back from those exchanges, which was a lot of the problem, that some of the behind the scenes exchanges were saying, well, no, sorry, you've breached this or that. And so it had this contagion that went on with bank runs. I mean, FTX was probably the first social media bank run that you ever saw, or social media collapse. So that started because there was some tweets at that time about the financial difficulties that FTX was in. I mean, there's a whole lot of other things that have happened since then that have been found out, but it sort of started with tweets, and that kicked off a bank run. So that was really interesting. And and since then, it probably hasn't changed as much as it should have. We're all watching at the moment with great anticipation as to what happens, because we're currently in a period where the price of Bitcoin has plummeted yet again, and regulation.
After it went up again, for a while,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And notwithstanding that regulation has caught up in some jurisdictions, it still hasn't caught up enough. And there's still not, for example, minimum liquidity requirements in many jurisdictions for some of these large digital currency exchanges. So it's a completely different ecosystem that when you come from traditional finance, you don't necessarily understand that you don't have a secured creditor, for example, or a secured creditor like we know a secured creditor at Goldman Sachs or some other sort of type investment bank. You have another cryptocurrency lender who has a smart contract that when its collateral dips, it just basically pulls the collateral.
So a smart contract is a contract that almost self-executes based on certain, thresholds being reached. So it's not something that humans then sort of enforce, have a default notice, whatever. It just does it, right? So
it just
again,
does it.
It's out of your control.
And it does it with amounts of money or cryptocurrency equivalent that are just, millions. It doesn't just do it with a few dollars. So it is quite extraordinary.
So this ecosystem is something that you've been focused on, with your specialization hat of insolvency, restructuring, cross-border insolvency on. Is it something that you have dabbled into yourself to better understand, what it is? Or have you actually run a mile from it, knowing, what the uncertainty is once it goes wrong? And again, if younger people are listening to this, what is it that you would sort of, say in terms of beware? Because we all obviously hope that if you do, invest in something, it goes up. But if it doesn't, the consequences can be severe. Is this what some people say, sheer gambling, or is it, something different? I mean, is there some guidance you can give?
When I say I've never dabbled, I've got a wallet. I do have a wallet, and we did do a little bit of an experiment in the office with 500 Australian dollars and just watch the wallet go up and down and learn how to play with it. Couple of things I would say. I'm not an investor. And primarily I'm not an investor, not because I don't think it's Bitcoin. I'll focus on Bitcoin. I actually think Bitcoin and probably Ethereum, some of the older, more established cryptocurrencies, will stick around. Simple as that.
The future. There's a reason for them to be there.
They're a new asset class. They're an absolute new asset class. Not necessarily because Ethereum's slightly different, because that does have a purpose to some extent with some of the projects that fintechs do. Bitcoin doesn't. Bitcoin's like cash. It's a fungible asset, and it's worth as much as somebody's willing to pay for it, essentially. But as you pointed out, the new generation coming through, they put a value on it. It's going to retain its value. Something has to happen for Bitcoin to actually disappear. I tend to think that's probably going to become the gold class digital asset, so to speak. It's the safe digital asset. It's not as volatile as some of the other tokens. But the couple of things that reasons I don't invest is, if you really want to make money in it, Bitcoin's probably not the way to go now. Bitcoin's done. Bitcoin's the solid blue chip share of the digital asset class. You can love it and leave it type of thing. I mean, sure, it may dive up and down, but it no longer dives from $0 to $100. It will go up and down over time, and it's like a share, basically.
It's like a blue chip share that you
chip
sort of
share.
invest in.
It may be a little bit more volatile, but it's not going to when I say it's not going to disappear, it appears that it's going to stick around. That's probably the best I can put it. The other thing with the other tokens, because there's thousands of tokens out there, that's the thing, is people that are really making a lot of money are investing in tokens that they trade 24 hours a day. I saw a kid and I say a kid, 13 or 14, I'm sure he never went to school. At one of the places when I was working remotely, he would come in at probably about 9:30, and he would set up his laptop, and it had 3 screens, and it was continuously up and down with the different cryptocurrency markets that were operating. And he was continuously trading. He would have been 13, maybe 14, and then he'd pack up at about 4 o'clock and he'd disappear. And I was pretty sure that he wasn't going to school, but he sat there all day, every day for, the 2 weeks that I was working in this particular WeWork type arrangement. So
And did he make money?
I don't know. I never asked him. He looked happy enough.
Okay, wow, God.
He's probably making more than his parents.
Well, yeah, there's that.
But it's a real commitment. It's like being a day trader, but in a more volatile market for some of those new cryptocurrencies. So, I mean, for the younger people, sure, give it a go, but you need to be able to be confident that what you're investing you can lose. Effectively, that's sort of my guess.
Yeah.
So
Crypto is something there to stay, and
I think
actually, it looks like governments are, getting into this space as well, right?
Yeah.
I read somewhere they're like, central bank digital currencies that are, being considered. I guess there is like, the example in China and sort of the I guess the negative things that are attached to that, because it provides control over, people, what have you. Do you think that any of that has legs, or is it just, still very much, swings and roundabouts? We don't know where this is going.
Personally, these are the views of me personally. These are not the views of Norton Rose Fulbright.
Yeah, understood.
Personally, I think there is legs in a central bank digital currency, but the question's going to be how they program it and what they program it to do. So I looked at this a couple of years ago for my master's in Rome, actually, whether or not the EU could introduce a central bank digital currency into the European Union framework. And it really that's the beauty of a central bank digital currency, is you can program it to do what you want. You can actually program it to make interest or to gain interest, or you can program it to literally be a replica of cash. The difficulty that you identified, it's exactly right, is privacy. But then query whether or not our privacy has almost left the building anyway, with all of the different ways that we transact.
Without us knowing. It's been taken.
Yeah. What's going to be interesting is who of the big economies gets there first, I think, because I think it's going to be a game changer. Who perfects it first, because the ease of transacting across borders will be phenomenal, effectively. Probably go wholesale first. We've got an experiment happening in Australia, or a project, or whatever they call it. But yeah, I'm more thinking the EU versus the States. So I think the States aren't looking anymore at a CBDC, but they're looking at a stable coin, because that's the other outlier, is banks may issue their own stable coins.
And the stable coin, because again, one of the things I'm thinking is, do we think that, the digital assets and digital currency are going to overtake the fiat currency? And then, the big institutions that are, depending on fiat currency, which are the banks, are they sort of, a dying breed? And we're going to sort of get rid of those, because sometimes, if you need to deal with stuff with banks, especially these days, they're these amorphous big institutions. Nobody represents them anymore. You can't talk to a human, and it's extremely frustrating to actually deal with.
You're sounding old, Peter.
Well, maybe I am becoming a slightly old.
Grumpy old mid-moment.
Moaning that I don't want to go to the checkout cashier that I do. I want to talk to to a person.
Yeah, look, it's an absolute problem, and that's something that I actually looked at. By introducing a central bank digital currency, you're effectively going to actually put your banks into insolvency, because what are they going to do? And the answer is a couple of answers. One, I assume your reserve bank or your central bank is not going to be a bank to public or a retail bank. So you're going to need to use those banks as intermediaries. So they'll probably take on a role in that regard. Will they take on a customer-facing role? I don't know, but we're moving away from that anyway. That's the problem. We're really far. I mean, in Australia, I've been working on a project with one of the government bodies here where there's difficulties with actually moving fiat currency around, because the profit margins in transporting that fiat currency around, especially in a country as big as Australia, it just dived so much that it's not profit making anymore, because not enough people are actually using fiat currency. So I think the unfortunate thing is we're moving in that direction anyway. And the question is, are we moving in that direction where it's going to be government controlled or privately controlled, as I said, by the banks with stable coins? It's difficult to know, and I think it may be a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. Where it'll be interesting is, as I said, with large transactions like wholesale transactions. I mean, what's going to happen, for example, if the states won't recognise a digital euro? I don't know where that's going to leave us.
Wow. Yeah. Look, it's a space we need to focus on. I maybe want to sort of, pivot a little bit back to like the more traditional special sits space. Maybe, last thing to mention is that you're also very active in women in cryptocurrency. It's like an association dealing with this space, very much focused on cryptocurrency, not necessarily only on insolvency and distress, right? Is just more generic. But outside of the day job of doing, private practice, you've also been active in various, organizations. We mentioned INSOL International already, but you're also for a long time already, active in UNCITRAL Work Group 5, which is like United Nations. International Trade Law Committee, that Working Group 5 focuses on insolvency law. What's sort of your experience there? Because that is obviously at a higher level, trying to sort of, give guidance to countries in practice as to, how do we best, have best practices in our area of expertise? And in my view, they and the World Bank and maybe INSOL International have really worked hard in the space, which means that all of a sudden special sits is, an area of expertise that stands on its own feet and is not longer a bolt-on to, anything else, especially in the law. It could be bolt-on to corporate, finance, litigation, what have you. So I think, my personal interest in that space is as well, but it's different from private practice, right? Can you maybe say, how did you get involved in that, and what it has done for your, I guess, your career being involved at that level as well?
It's it's eye-opening. Lawmaking is really eye-opening, and even though it's model laws as opposed to national laws, it's really eye-opening. Um, I'm not a patient person, and you need to be a patient person.
Yeah, difficult.
Um, it's like herding cats. It's fantastic in terms of when you see all the different contributors, not only the national bodies, but also the national governing organisations. But it's hard work. The thing I really love is the different perspectives people bring, because you get people from law background, accounting background, government background, different government departments, and then all over the world with all of their different legal and political frameworks. It's really, really, really interesting. The networks and the people that you meet are fantastic, because the one common denominator is usually people want to cooperate to do exactly as you said, to get into a situation where there is a common ground that is going to facilitate this international insolvency or this cross-border insolvency. That's why they're there,
Yeah.
as well as the trip to the Vienna Christmas markets.
So how did you get involved? Did you
Um,
just?
I don't even remember. I think it was part of INSOL from memory. And because I was traveling a lot at the time, they needed someone from Australia to actually be there. Our treasury wasn't sending anybody at the time. And so I went as a representative of Law Asia, which I still go as. And then I got very quickly onto one of the actual sub-working groups to draft the enterprise groups bolt on to the model law, which was really,
Yeah,
really
exactly.
interesting.
Which again is a challenge in itself, right? Because everything in our space is very much focused on entity by entity, and
Yeah.
if you're going into an insolvency, you look at each entity individually, but in a group, that really doesn't work necessarily, because outside of insolvency, you treat it almost as one entity, a
One.
group. And then all of a sudden, when it goes bad, we need to just artificially create different entities lots of issues.
And creating them over borders as well, because your entities are never always sitting in one jurisdiction. They're always spread around the world. So yeah, I started doing that. And then a lot of the people that are at INSOL and IBA are crossover. So again, you meet the same faces over and over again. Intellectually, it's a fantastic experience because it makes you think outside of your box, because as you mentioned earlier, we live in a very small bubble when we're in law firms of this is my law in my jurisdiction. And it really expands how other people do things. For example, I always thought insolvent trading was something that everybody had globally. So we specifically have an insolvent trading
Yeah.
cause of action. And I would say
And very
something that's
severe, right? Had huge consequences
very
until there were
severe.
safe harbors for it. Yeah.
Yeah, very severe. And when I first started going, I hadn't even turned my mind to it. It's not that I didn't, I believed everybody had it. I just hadn't turned my mind to it, the fact that other people didn't have it. So that was really, really eye-opening. And it means that when you're doing stuff, even now, I'll sort of look at something, and if it doesn't fit into a box in Australia, I'll turn my mind going, I'm sure there's something in, I don't know, Singapore that's like that. Or I'm sure this is very similar to the way that the European Union do X. So maybe let me just have a look at how they've done it, and then I'll model something. So especially when we do court directions, when we get something quirky, and we have to go and model our court directions if we don't have a strict law to go into, I'll often look outside the jurisdiction and even call on some of the fellows or call on some of the contacts and just say, how do you do X in your jurisdiction? Yeah. So it's been both intellectually stimulating, great for networking, and I don't even mean professional networking, but even just great for friendships and having other people that you can call on when there's really tricky things to negotiate.
Yeah. So you mentioned Yeah, patience. And my experience with, I guess, that part of special situations is indeed you're running into politics in policymakers, and that's a different breed.
Oh, yeah.
And it sort of also links to something I'm very interested in, and I've mentioned on other podcasts as well. Is why is it that it still is the case that financial distress has such negative stigma, and how all of us in the bubble are focused on rescue, early intervention, doing stuff. But actually, as you say, there are various views and various laws, but they're also based on political beliefs and beliefs in the country. So I was a week ago in Africa, on the Africa Round Table, and one of the things that in my experience in Africa is quite prominent is that financial distress is very criminalized still, right? And that has huge consequences and knock-ons as well. If you want to change that, that is a big ask. What are your views on, how does that actually, how do we attack that? And how do you get from, I guess, a criminalized system to a system where you facilitate entrepreneurship, you facilitate, rescue and growth in jobs, growth in economy. Those are, big things which make, I guess, our field less of the undertaker and more of actually there's a lot of things to actually create.
I joke when I get a new client and I say, you may not want to see me again. This is a one-off. You don't want, okay, thanks for the instructions, but maybe I won't see you again. It is true, and it might feed into what I sort of said earlier when dealing with stakeholders. There's a lot of egos, and if there is a stigma attached to failure, that's sort of a real catalyst in that whole attitude of we are the undertakers, we're the people of last resort. I think to some degree the states do it a bit better than some of the other common law countries because they've got Chapter 11. So it's not as stigmatized to the extent that yes, you're in Chapter 11, but you can come out of Chapter 11. Whereas in Australia, definitely, once you go into voluntary administration, it's almost like you're going to transition into liquidation.
Yep.
So it's changed a little bit with Safe Harbour, definitely. But the early hand up, we've got a problem we need to address, probably hasn't been as prominent for as the States, for example. I think changing the attitude of changing the attitude that just because you have financial difficulties, it doesn't mean you're terminally insolvent. Shall I use that phrase? There are
Or
ways
you're a
around.
criminal, right?
You're a
This is the whole
criminal,
thing.
yeah. We don't have
Fraud.
the criminality.
Well, but that is, in your space of crypto, you said, well, it started off with theft and hacking,
It's
and
true.
so you're almost like the victim of it. You're not the fraudster yourself, right?
Yeah,
And there are many reasons why you have financial distress,
yeah,
and you being a criminal yourself is one of the reasons, and they exist. But it's not the majority of
yeah.
cases. But it has that stigma. How do
It
you,
really does.
yeah.
I don't know. Education. I mean, how do you change humans believing that they've failed?
Well,
That's
I
sort
mean,
of,
what's your attitude to failure? Do you believe that yourself, or actually do you see it as an opportunity to learn and actually do better? Which is, I guess, the mentality I've always, and that's 30 years ago, and still the US is very much, they root for people having a go. And if you
yeah,
fall down, they're not like immediately putting you in a box of you failed, you're bad, whatever. No, get up again and have another go. And that is what you need. Entrepreneurship is all about that, right?
yeah, oh, absolutely. And I mean, what is failure? you had a go and it didn't work, but it may not have worked because you weren't good at it and you didn't like it. So it's, I don't know, with special sits, it's sort of different. But again, is it your fault that you had COVID? Is it your fault that
But tariffs come in, right? And you couldn't do
yeah.
anything about it.
So I mean, it's a mindset. It's an absolute mindset. It's a cultural thing as well. So that's deep seated. That's, I think, bigger than me and you, Peter.
Yes.
But it is definitely, and to a certain extent, going back to diversity, it's a change in attitudes when more females are going on boards. Because I think just having done some safe harbor advice for some big boards of late, you'll get a lot more females not necessarily wanting to put the companies into some sort of formal process, but asking questions. Should we do this? Can't we do this? Can we do this? And a lot more of definitely the older gentlemen are more about I've got this. I can fix this. And I think
Yeah.
that's also changing as well. And again, also not just with females on boards, but younger people on boards. Younger people who are now directors coming through have a different attitude as well.
Well, it's breaking the taboo, right? It's almost like financial distress. Ooh, I mean,
Yeah.
it's in your large mega law firm. It's trying to convince your colleagues that they also should
That's
bring
true.
you in, because you're not like a stain on whatever it is the situation. You're a potential sort of source of solutions to problems early on, and the more.
Yeah. And it's not only the financial problems, a lot of the time it's operational. So it's not even always the books themselves. I mean, sure, you're losing money, but might not be because you're doing something wrong on the financial side. You may be doing something wrong on the operational side. So I think, yeah, it's a complete change in mindset. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what the 100% answer is. The change in mindset is a big one. I think the interrelationship in a law firm and with accountancy firms working together early, really early, getting in there and educating directors, getting in there and educating the public, because that's the other thing. Media loves a sensational failure. They do.
So how do you then explain to your parents or to your friends that are not in the space what you do? Because I guess we need to start, I guess, selling or describing what we do a little bit more accurately to get the stigma away, right?
I probably don't describe it very well. I say I'm one of the world's best paid cleaners. I clean up other people's
This
mess.
is,
So
yeah.
I'm not very good.
You're cleaning up the mess, which sometimes with a burning platform we need to do. But I guess maybe we are the A&E or something different from.
But that's a great example, though. My parents wait to see something in the newspaper where it says, X has collapsed. And they're like, oh, you're working on X? Oh, what's happened? Oh, who stole the money? And so but it's always like that. It's not, oh, did X have a problem and you're helping X out of that problem. It's always the sensational side of the media. So I think there's a lot of things going against our special situations space, because everyone likes a good story.
Yeah, no, that's right. And look, we don't want to deprive them of a good story, but I guess for policymakers, it becomes tricky if that is their driver for what the law needs to be and what they can sell to the electorate, right? Because you and I are quote unquote the experts on the substance coming in, saying this is what it needs to do. But if that's not sellable to the main public because we're only focused on the criminals, then it's going to be very, very tricky to make a change.
Yeah, look, and they've got to focus. I guess in Australia, we focus a lot on the SME space. So we do definitely encourage entrepreneurship there. And that's probably, as per every jurisdiction, not the space that gets the biggest focus on collapses. And we need the good news stories.
Yeah,
X had
the
a,
success stories need to be. I fully agree. And
yeah,
again, that is something that also the media needs to bring, because people need to be comfortable that they come forward and not be branded and sort of put in public prison. Uh,
shame.
uh, yeah, shamed, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, that to me is something that is, not so easy, and requires patience, unfortunately, to move forward.
Neither of
One of
us
the
have.
things, one of the things that I feel this generation that is coming up is focused on a lot more than you and I probably were when we started our careers. Is the why, right? Why are we doing what we're doing? Have you sort of, for yourself, because you've been doing it for a while, like I have, what is the why for you doing, the work in special sits? What is it that, attracts you to this space?
Oh God, there's so much. I like the variety of the work. It's front end and back end. You get something of every. Well, in what I do, I get both, so it's something for everyone. I really like working in large teams, because the stuff I do is large teams, and I like when everybody's going the same direction to come to a resolution, or as you say, if we're not saving the company, we're at least getting something for the creditors, or we're getting we're getting an outcome, a positive outcome. And I love it when there's different people from different backgrounds and different groups, and everybody's driving in the same direction to actually achieve that outcome. Um, the dollars and cents, I mean, I've done a lot of large insolvency for a long time, so the dollars and cents almost become a little bit meaningless. So it's no longer, am I getting am I saving $1 million company or $100 million company? It sort of doesn't matter. It's the same outcome at the end of the day. You want to keep people in jobs if possible. This is a really terrible time of the year. As I said earlier, we usually get a Christmas special, and we're always conscious about terminating people before Christmas. So that's another why. Why do I like doing it? With most of my clients, they're really compassionate about those types of things and really conscious about those types of things. So we can intellectualize the insolvency per se, but then at the end of the day, these, especially the liquidators, they're going in and they're dealing with real people and real problems, and they need help doing it. And we all drive in that direction to actually get good outcomes to the extent that we can. Um, and then, it's intellectually stimulating. I mean, I say that to all of the juniors that say, oh, I get bored doing X or I get bored doing Y. It's like, you'll never get bored doing special situations, because it is special on every occasion.
Yeah,
It's different.
it's not cookie cutter. It's bespoke, and solutions from one situation don't apply in the other necessarily.
It's so different. It's such a diverse area of law. I think it's underrated personally, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so, based on your experience, what would you say is a success? Is success in special sits? Then is there one sort of outcome that is typecast success, or is it very much again situation specific? And if so, well, what is it?
It's situation specific. The ones I really hate are family companies that have been built up over generations, and then they get destroyed in one generation just from one event, or a small something like that. So, um, what is a successful outcome? If you can resurrect the company or group of companies, even if it's in a different structure, especially if it's something that's a brand that's grown up through generations. I think that's a really, really good success story. And if you can't, it's ensuring probably employees more than directors, directors, but probably that employees are as looked after as much as possible, because they've often done nothing wrong. Generally speaking, they're not the ones. And a lot of the time they haven't been paid for a while or haven't had their pensions paid because they are loyal to the company. So it's the long-time workers that you sort of look at in some of these companies, especially when it's not, it's just something out of the director's control or some event that occurs and you just think it's a rubbish situation to be in for anybody. So if you can ensure that they get a good outcome or as best outcome as possible, that's probably a good result, I think.
Yeah.
And people would like to say that I get 100 cents back in the dollar for the bank. Yeah, that's awesome. But at the end of the day, they're a bank. But there's real people involved in what we do.
Yeah.
Which
No,
I
no,
think,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's rescue on the one hand, but it's also efficient liquidation and actually,
Yeah.
turning the page and having another opportunity at the end of it is equally important, right? It is just being able to deal with it efficiently, either rescuing viable businesses or taking care of unviable ones seems to be where the solution lies, right?
And I think my best one, this was years ago, where we had employees that actually managed to buy out the business, which that was an awesome result. It was a small one as SME, but that was an awesome result because they were long-time employees and they managed to pull together to actually pull it through a scheme of some form. So, yeah.
That's great. So at the start, we sort of mentioned that special sits is not like a 9 to 5 profession. It is very much yeah, it's full on. When it's full on, it may be quiet for a little bit. How has your profession actually influenced your life and you as a person? Um, you've been doing it for a while. You still enjoy doing it. But yeah, it's not always plain sailing. How do you deal with sort of, getting the balance right? Earlier in your career, you said, look, I was about to be burned out. I needed to do something different. But then you had a go at, doing the same that you did before, but probably in a better way because you've learned. What is sort of, lessons learned that you have there that you could maybe share for people that are, considering things?
Tips for young players.
Well, yeah, or sometimes for old players too, who are dealing with issues.
Oh, God. Boundaries. But you need to know, so people say, oh, put in boundaries, but that's also swings and roundabouts because, for example, I mean, 2 weeks ago, I worked till 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, there was no way I could put a boundary in there because a judge needed something at 9 o'clock the next morning. So I'm not about to say, I'm sorry, Your Honour, but, boundaries. So there's definite boundaries. There's a very high expectation with some people where they have their own deadlines, not because they're judicial or statutory deadlines, but they want to go on holidays or they want to make themselves look better in front of their superiors, etc. So you need to sort of juggle your boundaries and have realistic boundaries and early discussions with your clients and your colleagues about what is truly urgent and what is not tonight, but tomorrow by 10 o'clock or something like that. So I think that's a huge one. Exercise. So
Yeah,
when I'm about
helps.
to lose my mind, I go for a swim now. I'm not a great swimmer, but it does mean that I do have to concentrate on not drowning. So I don't actually think about what I'm actually
Yes.
doing.
Yeah.
So and there's a guy that I work with, he's a paralegal, and he's brilliant because sometimes when I'm, as he says, muttering to myself and actually getting really frustrated, he'll say, I think it's time that you go for a swim. And I'm like, but I've got no time to go for a swim. And he said, you've got time to go for a swim now and you can come back to this. It's like, you need to go for a swim. I'm like, okay, I'm going for a swim now. um,
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Exactly.
and surrounding yourself with people that you trust for them to turn around and say, no, you've got to stop, or you're going down a rabbit hole, or, you you don't realize half the time when you're nearly burnt out. So you need somebody to be able to tap you on the shoulder. And I think a lot of people, when you get to a senior level, don't have that because, I don't know, you feel like you're indispensable. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And for you, what is it outside of your profession that you want to do, and have you been able to do it?
yes and no. So I travel a bit, but I marry that with the profession. So UNCITRAL as an example, I'm going to, I mean, I kill myself, but I'm going to do it. I'm flying into Amsterdam before I go to Vienna. So I'm flying into Amsterdam on Saturday afternoon to see some friends' kids, the French.
Yep, yep.
See some friends'
A
kids.
new arrival. Yep.
A new arrival, yep. And I'm bringing them their Sinterklaas presents, and then I'm spending the day with them and half the day the next day, and then I'm off to Vienna. So as much as possible, I don't let any opportunities like that slip by, because as much as I'm tired on the day, you can't get those back. You cannot get those memories and that time back. So I'm really big on living for now. So take every opportunity. Tomorrow may not come.
And have you been have you had to learn that? Because for me,
Yeah.
especially with feast and famine, I was very bad at actually taking the opportunity when there's famine to actually recharge the batteries. You're immediately very worried. Where's the next thing coming from? You feel like you're not doing anything, and you're putting a lot of pressure on you, and obviously feel like you're in an environment where you always need to go full on. How do you how have you changed that mindset for yourself?
Yeah, it's really hard. We're type A personalities, so it's really, really hard. I've had to learn it, and I'm not great at it in terms of, even though I go away, I'll take my laptop with me, but in my head, I'll do an hour of work and then go off to the beach, which is better for me than actually not doing that hour of work, because then I'd fret. That's just a
Yeah,
personal
exactly.
thing.
Yeah,
I'm not that driven in terms of any more, the feast or famine mentality. I've learnt to live with that a lot more.
yeah,
Um, and I think as I've gotten older, I'm a little bit more relaxed that, people will come back when they need you, and if they don't, so be it. Um, Something else will come along. I think the
yeah.
junior guys are much better at it than us. I think they're way better at, work-life balance than we are.
Yeah, but again, that changes throughout your career all the time too, right? There's not one work-life balance that works.
No.
If you're very young and you're your 20s, that's when you need to, in my view, work hard, take risks, do stuff, and you can afford it, right, to do it. If then you're already saying, well, boundaries is not later than 6 o'clock, I'm only starting, then it's not going to work. There needs to be flexibility there as well. And
Yeah.
as you say, you're also a certain personality. There's energy, there's drive. You want to do stuff. Well, channel it in the right way, right?
And I do things that people would think were like, "Oh my god, that's not relaxation," but I really enjoy it. So I've just started doing, tutoring at a university, and people go, "Oh my god, that's like heaps of work." I actually really enjoy it. I really
Is that
enjoy.
is that your sort of your appointment that you started in this year?
Yeah, that's
Great.
my yeah. So I teach once every 3 weeks. I've got to be available a couple of hours a week online. It's not a real huge commitment because I'm teaching things that I do every day. So sure, you've got to brush up on the text a little bit, but and I actually really enjoy dealing with most of the students. Same way as I quite enjoy dealing with most of the junior lawyers. Sure, you've got different people all the time, but generally speaking, I really enjoy and I enjoy their different perspective. I find it I find the fact that they're not jaded yet and they're still so keen to do law and still so keen to do things and experience things, it's actually really refreshing. So, as
Do
much
you
as
do
that's work,
insolvency law, or is it more general?
corporations and insolvency. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a mix.
yeah.
It's a mix, but they're fascinated. I mean, they're fascinated, and it's not just war stories. They're more fascinated with how, as you said, the why, how things work.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
really interesting.
it keeps you on your toes, doesn't it? Because
Yeah,
for a lot of things, you just think they are the way they are because I've been dealing with it so much. Then all of a sudden, you get a question about it, like, well, why are they like that? Ooh, that's
yeah,
actually a very good question. I haven't really thought about it.
yeah, but it's absolutely true. And I don't do too much of it, and I don't deep dive into academia to the extent of writing heaps of papers. But I don't know. It's just yeah. I find them generally really fun and really keen to learn. So if someone's keen to learn, I'm happy to teach. Um,
I couldn't agree with you more. So we've sort of we covered quite a bit on like where we are, how we got there. What I also want to do a little bit is look forward and
oh,
look forward as to where things are going, and maybe also where do you see yourself in this space going forward for I don't know how long it is, long as you want to and you're given. I mean, one thing that everybody, talks about all the time is AI, right? I've talked about it. It is something that is inevitable, but exactly how it's going to, influence our space isn't fully clear yet. What's sort of your take on things?
so I was part of the Norton Rose pilot group of using our internal. We use Harvey. If that's, I'm not sure if I can give that as an ad, but we use Harvey.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually do use it. I I don't think it will replace junior lawyers in any shape or form. I actually think um, more senior people will get more of a benefit out of it if they actually embraced it, because effectively you use it in the same way as you would use in the nicest possible way, a junior lawyer. You actually have to tell it what you need it to do. And if you don't know what you want it to do, of course it's not going to perform. Um, so I use it for more litigation than our space at the moment, simply because we have a lot of restrictions on using AI with some of our clients. So with litigation, I used it a couple of weeks ago. We had a 4-day trial, and we were throwing the transcripts through at night to do a nightly report to the client. It would spit out a day's worth of legal transcript in about 2 minutes, and would give you a really good base to then go through, because we have to read the transcripts anyway, to go through and go tweak. Oh, you got that wrong, AI. Yep, good point,
Yep.
good point, good point, done. So what would take a junior lawyer probably, I don't know, 3 hours was taking them not even an hour. So there's some really good benefits. I don't use it religiously like some people do. I'm very aware of its limitations, probably because I was brought on board very early on in the piece, so I'm very cautious with its use. But I think it's going to be a fantastic tool to do that grunt work that some of the junior lawyers have to do, that they can then free up their time to do other things that may actually benefit the matter and the clients more. But in saying that, because I think the concern with some of the junior lawyers is they'll miss their learning by going through some of that grunt work and do those steps.
What are
Um,
the reps that they need to do that we did? That
yeah,
obviously forms you as a lawyer, or are there going to be different reps, or do you just become a different type of lawyer?
I think that well, I don't know over how long, but in the immediate future, I see it. It's the way that I've been using it, which is, I don't know, I'll make something up, a chronology for litigation. You've got 5,000 documents. You throw those through AI and they will give you a chronology in under 5 minutes. But I would never hand that chronology anywhere near a court. So that junior is going to have to go through and still sanity check that chronology and still know the documents. But what they're not going to have to do is sit there and type email from, email to, dated such and such, which we've
That
all
takes a lot of
done.
time. Yeah.
And they're going to then be able to still get the benefit of reading the documents, still get the benefit of understanding the documents, but also have the benefit of less time actually trawling through. And let's be honest, they can be then moved on to the next phase of that. So, yeah, I think it's a great tool. I use it a lot also to sanity check myself. So, yeah.
You haven't
So for
forgotten anything, or you get a good start. Yeah.
yeah, or that you, I mean, what did I use? I think I used it on something last week. Oh, that's right. We were trying to work out whether or not particular documents had been tendered into evidence. And so I'd done very quickly checked it off, and I threw it through the transcripts through AI, and they picked up 3 or 4 more. So again, it wasn't going to be 100%, but for what I needed quickly, and for 85 to 90%, absolutely was a game changer.
So speed, and it's maybe the client would want to have lower cost attached to it. Do you use it outside of your profession? Because again, looking at my 2 boys, especially one of them, he uses it almost with everything that he
Yeah,
does. Any question that is facing him, in life, he has the paid for version of ChatGPT. Bam, he goes through it, and it is his personal assistance in life. I mean, do you think that? Well, is that
I
how you
don't.
use it as well?
I don't, but that's probably because I'm cautious of the errors it makes. But in saying that, a friend of mine who's our age is a personal assistant, and she does itineraries through it. And she showed me. So I love vintage shopping. That's not a surprise to most people that would listen to this. I'm an Olympic level shopper. And so when I go to countries, I sort of try and go to all the vintage clothes shops. And she said, well, just ask ChatGPT to make you a 3-day itinerary of, say, Vienna, listing all of the clothes shops plus all the places that you can have coffee and giving you the routes. And within, it was like not even 5 minutes. And I had it out, day 1, time 1 to time 2. It will take you half an hour to walk here, or you can catch the 60 bus from this stop. You will
Yeah.
stop at coffee here. You will go to this shop here. So I think I will start using it for some things like that, but not to the extent of your sons who, ask a
No,
question.
it's just like, but they grow. I mean, look, that's the direction we're heading. It seems, right? But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. I
so.
spent hours doing that.
Yeah, well, it is, and I guess for me personally, being a lawyer is also your take on things, right? So sometimes actually positioning something in a certain way that is your way is very important. And if you let AI start it, you're sort of they've decided how to start as
Yeah.
opposed to use this. So it depends what it is, right? But ultimately, advice is something that should
That's
be.
what I was that's what I was sort of saying in terms of using it in a law firm. I actually think senior people mid-level to senior people will benefit more than junior people because they know what they want it to do. That's
Yeah. So
that you need that experience because otherwise if AI tells you something, you sort of go, "Oh, okay," but it could be completely wrong.
yeah, no, exactly. And you need to sort of the building blocks easily
Mm.
accessible, and then you just make something out of it yourself. You have the ingredients, but then you prepare the soup yourself, right? So
Yep.
yeah, I think that makes sense. Is there anything else that you see coming down the pike? I mean, obviously, your crypto space is not going away, and is already something that is a new addition to. The special sit space, and there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be resolved. Do you think that is going to be bigger going forward?
I think it's not gonna be bigger necessarily. I think it's going to become more normal. I think that's going to be the change. I mean, we're seeing, I don't do family law, for example, but there's so many family law cases coming up where there's cryptocurrency that's being fought over. where people are trying to hide assets through cryptocurrency. I think litigation is going to be a big one for crypto. There's going to be cryptocurrency disputes over things like smart contracts, over I owe Joe X amount of Bitcoin. How do you prove it? So how's the Evidence Act or those types of things going to come into play? Educating judges, and I don't mean that they're intellectually incapable, but they're a certain set of people like we are that haven't ever come across crypto necessarily. So educating judges, applying the traditional principles. I'm not really sure that we're going to need to change laws for crypto, either in our space or in the litigation space. I just think adapting to what we've got.
You need to fit it in. It's sort of it's a new
Yeah.
thing that needs to go
Yeah.
into the existing thing. And maybe we need to, clarify certain concepts
Yeah,
to make it fit
absolutely.
in, but it doesn't need to be a whole, whole overhaul.
No, and I just think it's going to become more mainstream, whether or not we're going to get a whole lot more liquidations, like another crypto winter. It's not impossible, because as things regulate, you're going to get the players that just can't meet those regulations. So they're going to fall by the wayside, whether or not they're going to fall quietly or very loudly, like some of the crypto winter players. And then what else are we seeing? I think you're going to see a lot more diversity in special sits. It's a lot more women coming through. Our department is pretty much solely women. There's 2 men in our department, so there's a lot more females coming through. And I think that's going to also change, in a way, either good or bad, some of the way things are done, some of the way negotiations are undertaken.
Yeah.
Just
And
it's
cross border also means, more diverse backgrounds. There's all kinds
absolutely.
of different countries, cultures coming in, and, it will all be part of, the special sauce for the deal, right?
Yeah, and there's probably going to be a little bit more fluidity with civil law, common law, especially in our space. The demarcation is there, but as you're doing cross-border insolvency, it sort of falls away to some extent. That whole civil law, common law way of doing things is becoming a little bit more fluid, especially with some of the international courts. I think international courts are going to become more commonplace as well. Singapore's got one.
Yeah,
I think the UK.
you're registered there, right? So
Yep.
you can litigate there.
Yes, Singapore's got one, Dubai's got one, I think Paris has got one. So I think that's going to become more prominent over the next few years. I mean, could you imagine litigating in Singapore 20 years ago? It was so far out of the realms of our concepts.
It is, but again, if you look at society these days and sort of zoom out, the global I guess geopolitics is very much direction deglobalization
Yep.
as opposed to globalization. Do you think any of that is going to translate into our space? Because obviously we were talking about model laws, but harmonization of the substantive law has been very difficult because insolvency is so culturally and sort of country specific as well. So what do you think? Is there going to be a trend towards more harmonization, or are we going to have, a retrenchment going back to territorialism and maybe
Yeah.
a competition between, countries? Who has the most, favorable insolvency laws? And that's where the cases are going to be.
It's a very, very interesting question, because if you would have asked me probably 5 years ago, would we be here with some of the nationalistic approaches to some countries, I would never have thought that we would be. So, I mean, it's highly possible that we could actually move in some jurisdictions to a more territorialism type methodology. I don't know, but I mean, look at the way politics are. I mean, there's people that are sort of saying, "Oh, we want to leave the EU." Do you? I mean, if that starts happening, then yeah, I mean, the states are an unknown quantity. I mean, with the tariffs and things like that. So it would be relatively easy for that to translate into other areas of law and society. I don't, I hope not. We've come so far, but there's nothing to say that it's not going to go back to bilateral treaties or multilateral treaties rather than, say, a model law. I don't know.
Yeah, I find it. Yeah, it's interesting, and the influence that geopolitics has on businesses generally, but also our space, is it feels like it is a lot more than it always has been, which makes it even more unpredictable. And obviously, you and I thrive in uncertainty because that is sort of the space we're in. But a little bit of certainty is, goes a long way because we need to start somewhere with something, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. There is so much uncertainty in the bigger economies now. That's the problem. It's like you would always go to the States and think, oh, well, X is going to happen. And now you're like, is X going to happen? It should happen. And the law says it should happen, but is X going to happen? I only use the States as an example because it's the one that springs to mind. But equally, I mean, I look at Italy, who always, I'm there all the time. I mean, they've got a different government to what they had a few years ago, where they had bankers as the prime minister. So, yeah, it's really uncertain.
Yeah. Well, we've covered quite a
Yeah.
bit, and I'm very grateful for your generosity with sharing things and the time. One sort of question, final question I have to try to land the plane a little bit is always, for the younger people that look at this and listen at this and get excited about, special sits as a profession, be it on the legal side, on the financial side, whatever. What would be your advice to them if they are considering this, based on what you've experienced?
It's fun.
I
It's
agree with
hard
that.
work. It's
Yes.
fun, hard work. Don't ever think you know everything, because you will always be made a fool of, because something different will pop up in every single situation. Be flexible, be resilient, and take what you can from it. And I don't mean that in a financial sense. I mean, the people around you that are doing it are the similar personalities. They thrive in uncertainty. They thrive in it's a fast pace. For me, it's just fun. You've got to be a problem solver, and
Well,
you've got to be so flexible in both in mind. You just need to roll with the punches, because you see everything. You can't be stuck in your ways. If that's you've got to just roll with what's coming, and you've got to have a sense of humor. You really, really need to have a sense of humor, because I
I
have
agree.
seen some bizarre things.
One thing that I would add, and I think you're sort of a case in point, is that if you have the opportunity to sort of leave your own country and culture and be exposed to others, I think that opens up your mind a lot and enriches you, and that is actually what you need in this space more than anything, especially now that it gets more and more cross-border.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. Every opportunity that comes your way, you should grab with both hands. And I include, if going in-house to an accounting firm, or going in-house to a bank to understand how banks work, or how banks decide who they lend to. I mean, all of that just enhances your understanding of the overall stakeholders.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
does that mean, the 7-year-old Lee was looking at the television and seeing, the judge in the robe? Is that what, you're still aiming for, maybe becoming a judge as well down the road? Then you've ticked that box as well?
Yep, that's probably the ultimate. I don't want to be a judge. I want to be a procedure judge. So I would like to be an insolvency. So we have two lots of judges here. We have the judges that sit on cases for days on end, and then we have the judges that do the short and sharp applications, predominantly in the corporations insolvency field. That's me. Bring them in, churn them out. Bring them in, churn them out.
Excellent. Well, I'm wishing you all the best with, pursuing that. Thanks again for, I thought a great conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
your time.